Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. Our favorite hat guy, the former 6th Fatui Harbinger, Scaramouche, also known as Wanderer, will get his rerun in patch 3.8, and in this video I will talk about Wanderer and his complete guide including his farming materials, his playstyle, what weapons he'll use, what artifacts he'll use, what's the best team comps for him, details about his constellations and finally a gameplay showcase. For this guide, I will use Skyward Atlas and 2-piece Shimenawa with 2-piece Viridescent sets. Alright, let's begin. For Wanderer's Ascension materials, first you need to farm Rukkhashava mushrooms, the local specialities of Sumeru. There are a total of 89 mushroom you can find and you need to collect 168 for him. I already made a farming guide for these mushrooms. Please check the video description and pinned comment for more information. Perpetual Caliber is dropped by the robot chicken at Devantaka Mountain. Kill the chicken and collect 46 of the cylinders. Kill every samurai of Inazuma and collect 36 of Old Handguard, 96 of Keguchi Handguard and 129 of Famed Handguard. For ANEMO stones, collect 1 small, 9 medium, 9 large and 6 extra large stones. You can always change the stones from other elemental stones by using Dust of Azoth. For leveling up his talents to 90, you need to farm Praxis series from Basket of Discipline domain at Sumeru on Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday. Collect 9 of brown books, 63 of silver books and 114 of the golden books. And finally for his boss drops, you need to bonk his former self and collect 18 of the fidget spinner drops. As an on-field ANEMO DPS, Wanderer takes up the majority of the team's field time in order to deal high amounts of damage with normal and charged attacks while using his skill. His normal and charged attacks deal ranged slashes of ANEMO that deal high damage. However, the damage numbers are also dependent on his skill where he starts flying. His elemental skills is unique than other characters. While using it, he will start floating mid-air by dealing ANEMO damage to the nearest enemies. In this state, his hat disappeared and a ring will appear in his back. It also provides a multiplicative damage increase to his normal and charged attacks. In this floating state, he uses an alternative blue stamina bar. All of Wanderer's movement while floating drains this blue stamina bar including sprinting, lifting or even staying still. But keep in mind, his charged attack doesn't consume this blue stamina. That's why it's easier to spam his charged attack without any hesitation. His elemental burst is straightforward damage dealing ability where he stomp the ANEMO vortex and deal AoE ANEMO damage. But do remember, it will end your floating state if you are using his burst while using the skill. While using Wanderer, I recommend using his burst first and then skill and normal attacks. With his first passive ability, if his elemental skill comes into contact with Hydro, Pyro, Cryo, Electro when it is unleashed, this instance of the wind-favored state will obtain the following buffs according to the contacted elements. Hydro can increase 20 blue stamina points. Pyro increases attack by 30%. Cryo increases crit rate by 20% and Electro can restore 0.8 energy when you hit an opponent with normal and charged attack. But do remember, you can have up to 2 different kinds of these buffs simultaneously at C0. With his 4th passive, when Wanderer deals normal and charged attack while using his elemental skill, he will get the descent effect where he can shoot 4 wind arrow towards the enemies while dashing. But the good thing is, the descent dash will not consume the blue stamina points. Wanderer is briefly surrounded by a blue glow and you can hear this sound when the descent effect will be triggered. For his talent priorities, I recommend normal and charged attack over elemental skill greater than equal to elemental burst. There are quite a few options to choose from when picking the right weapon for Wanderer. If possible, your weapon should focus on crit rate or crit damage, with attack or elemental mastery being good backup options. Wanderer's signature weapon Tuletula's Remembrance is his best option. It's currently tied for having the highest attack stat out of any catalyst while also having a respectable crit damage secondary stat. It also boosts his normal attack speed and damage, which are key stats to his DPS. Lost Prayer to the Sacred Winds has good stats and a useful effect that boosts the user's movement speed and their elemental damage. Both buffs are nice for the Wanderer, making Lost Prayer to the Sacred Winds a solid option. Skyward Atlas is a consistent weapon that's always valuable on Wanderer. It has an attack stat of 674 and 33.1% extra attack as its stats at its maximum level, with an effect that boosts elemental damage. Furthermore, it has an additional effect where normal attacks have a 50% chance of creating a cloud that deals more damage to the enemy. When choosing the right 4-star weapon, the Widseath will be your best option. This weapon gives a base increase of 12% to crit damage. Its special skill will give Wanderer a random theme song for 10 seconds when he takes the field, which can only occur once every 30 seconds. This weapon will give Wanderer a solid overall increase to all of his important stats, including Elemental Mastery if you want to buff his swirl reactions. Battle Pass subscribers can get several copies of Solar Pearl, an excellent 4-star catalyst for Wanderer. It has 510 attack and a 27.6% crit rate at max level, which are good stats. More importantly, its effect is always useful for him. Wanderer regularly uses his normal attacks, so having that buff his elemental skill and burst damage is great. Likewise, using his elemental skill or burst to increase normal attack damage is also wonderful. Sadly, this weapon is 100% unobtainable for F2P players since you must spend real-life money to purchase the Gnostic Hymn. For a free-to-play option, you should choose the map Amare. This will give a base increase of 36 to his Elemental Mastery. Its special skill will give an 8% elemental damage bonus for 10 seconds when Wanderer triggers an elemental reaction. This will have a maximum of 2 stacks. This weapon, though not as great as the others, will still give a solid boost to Wanderer's ANEMO damage output, but will mostly focus on increasing the damage from his swirl reactions with the increase to Elemental Mastery. Wanderer's best artifact is Desert Pavilion Chronicle. The 4-piece set boosts ANEMO damage by 15% in normal, charged, and plunging attack damage by 40%, which significantly increases damage without drawbacks. You have to use a charge attack to set off the attack buff, but it isn't difficult to do using Wanderer's kit. Viridescent Venerer 2-piece set also offers a 15% ANEMO damage bonus, but the 4-piece focuses on swirl attacks. Most of Wanderer's utility comes from his raw attack power rather than elemental reactions like swirl, so it's best to save it for an ANEMO teammate who may need it more. Wanderer is an attack-based character, so attack-boosting artifacts like Shimenawa's Reminiscence, Gladiator's Finale, and Vermilion Hereafter also work. Out of those 3, Shimenawa's has the most relevant 4-piece set bonus because it raises normal, charged, and plunge attack damage by 50% for 10 seconds. However, unlike Desert Pavilion, it eats energy in exchange. You don't even need a 4-piece set for any of these artifacts. If you only have 2 ideal artifacts from each set, try to mix and match them to get a serviceable build. For example, combining 2 Shimenawa's Reminiscence and 2 Gladiator's Finale equals a 36% attack bonus in total. Focus on crit damage, crit rate, and attack percent for Wanderer's artifact substats. His energy recharge is less important because his elemental skill has a short cooldown, and his damage doesn't heavily rely on his more needy elemental burst. Don't forget that he's an ANEMO catalyst. In that sense, it still makes the most sense to give him an ANEMO damage goblet. Then complement that with an attack percent sans and crit damage or crit rate circlet to round out the build. For the most part, Wanderer is meant to be played as an on-field main DPS. Teams need to be built around him and he usually contributes to the most damage in the entire team. Wanderer hypercarry teams buff him as much as possible. The best buffer for Wanderer is Faruzan, but unfortunately, she has crippling energy issues which make it very difficult to suggest her, unless she is at C6. Yunjin is suggested instead of non-C6 Faruzan, since she can buff normal attack damage. At C6, Faruzan will outperform Yunjin for the buffer spot. Bennett acts as the healer and attack buffer. He also enables Wanderer to absorb Pyro and give himself an additional attack buff. The last slot is for shielders since Wanderer is prone to get hit while in midair. Each suggested shielder brings something different to the table. Zhongli shreds all elemental resistance of enemies. Both Diona and Layla allow Wanderer to absorb Cryo and gain a crit rate buff, while Diona also provides the additional utility of healing. Toma activates Pyro Resonance and attack buff as well as acts as a secondary source of Pyro for Wanderer. Venti has great synergy with Wanderer since he can tightly group up enemies and make them temporarily immobile. Sucrose can also serve a similar function, albeit not to the same degree as Venti. C4 Jean has one of the rarest abilities to shred ANEMO resistance. Prior to Faruzan, C4 Jean and ANEMO Traveler were the only options for ANEMO resistance shred. Being a healer, Jean is always a better choice than ANEMO Traveler. Not to mention Jean and Bennett form the Sunfire Jean duo, which has pretty decent damage potential on its own. Pairing C6 Faruzan and C4 Jean provide plenty of ANEMO resistance shred for hypercarry Wanderer. In a sub-DPS Wanderer team, Wanderer still plays the role of the main DPS, but he is no longer the hypercarry. Xiangling joins him and contributes to a pretty high share of total team damage. She also benefits from Bennett's attack buff, not to mention he acts as a great battery for her. In a cryo team, Wanderer takes advantage of enemies frozen in place, since he can take damage while airborne and frozen enemies cannot damage him. This team lets him play without the need for a shielder. In this team, Wanderer is accompanied by 2 sub-DPS who will further increase the team's total damage. Kaya's icicles follow Wanderer midair, so it might be difficult to hit the enemy. Rosaria is advisable since her cryo application stays on the ground. In a taser team, Wanderer is not the only DPS. He acts as the driver for Xinqiu, Yellen and Beidou or Fischl's off-field abilities as well as contributing his own personal damage. In this team, Wanderer could be equipped with the Viridescent Venerer set, to reduce the enemy's resistance to Electro and Hydro. In this variant of the taser team, Xinqiu and Yellen's Hydro damage contributes to a good chunk of the team's overall damage. Most characters work well with the national team. This is because the core of the national team is very strong. Even then, some characters synergize with national core more than others. These include Raiden Shogun, Kazuha, Sucrose, etc. Luckily, Wanderer is also one such character. If players are struggling to create a team around Wanderer, they could opt to play him in the national team, which is always high-performing and reliable. Most of Wanderer's Constellations is only a DPS increase, with an exception in C4 and C6. Therefore, if players are only trying to get Wanderer's C1 or C2, then it's not worth it. His C1 increases his attack speed when his elemental skill is active and boosts the damages dealt by his Ascension passive. However, other than additional damage, the first constellation for Wanderer provides no other utility. With C2, Wanderer gains a bonus on his elemental burst. The bonus itself is great and can pretty much double his burst DPS, but considering ANEMO doesn't have a reaction like Melt or Vaporize, the damage ceiling for this ability is rather low. Normally, Wanderer can only get up to 2 buffs from his Ascension passive, but with the C4 effect, he can now have up to 3. One of the 3 is even randomly assigned and players don't need to actually come in contact with the assigned element. If it hits on the right elements, C4 Wanderer can be a handy source of buffs. And finally, C6 allows him to use his elemental skill for a longer duration. He also deals more frequent damage, which not only boosts his normal DPS but also increases his potential in triggering Swirl. For this showcase, I am going to use some of my favorite teams. My Wanderer is Constellation 0 with 2-piece Shimenawa and 2-piece Viridescent set. And for the weapon, I am using R1 Skyward Atlas and on a decent crit rate and crit damage ratio. With that said, I hope the guide was helpful and I hope you'll enjoy the showcase.
Think you can get away?
Things are about to get dicey. Quietly now. The wind rises. Upon the gale. Wretched vermin! Behold!
Here comes the catch.
Cry louder! Behold!
Teamwork is dreamwork! Ears of the storm! Too late for it!
Unsightly insects! Behold! Quietly now.
I'm going in!
The wind rises. Wretched vermin! Behold!
So that's everything about Wanderer. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, consider subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. Comment down your thoughts on Wanderer and what's your plans on Wanderer pulls. With that being said, I hope this guide will helpful and I will catch you guys in the next one.
Oh! Bang! Hiya!